Hello! Welcome to Why Not Both, the podcast all about how our multiple passions and interests shape our identity and our lives. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I am a musician and therapist in Los Angeles, and I also happen to be your host. This podcast is produced by Laura Studeris, and for this season, we've partnered up with Under the Radar magazine. If you like what you hear, you can hang out with us on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram at WNB the podcast. And if you really, really like what you hear, please support us on Patreon. We are under Why Not Both podcast. When you join our Patreon, you get a whole bunch of really cool behind the scenes stuff and you get to chat with us. And that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy our interviews. This week, we had the pleasure of chatting with Mia from Pom Pom Squad. I hope you enjoy our interview. I feel like Zoom has become like all of our best friends.
Or worse enemies.
I was like, why not both? Podcast.
There. I get it.
Oh my gosh. It's a good friend of me, for sure. Like,
People settle in front of me.
It's so funny. When I started the podcast, I used to ask people like, so what are all the things you do? And now I'm just like, so how's life? Like, you okay over there?
That's entertainment enough, is just like figuring out what everybody else lives like. You know what I mean?
Right?
It's hard to fathom.
It's been a really interesting time to be making art or not making art, or sometimes making art. Like, it's weird because, like, did you have any times during this entire experience where you're just like, yep, not going to make anything, and then other times where you're like, okay, I want to make all the things at the same time?
Yeah. Well, I guess, how's it been doing a podcast? Because I feel like now podcasting has become like the thing to do.
Yeah, it was weird because I started it. I mean, I feel weird like admitting this, having a podcast, but like I started it kind of by accident, and it's not like I was like huge into podcasts before. Like, I wasn't against podcasts, but I wasn't like a super fan of any. But I was like, oh, it would be really interesting to talk to people about the multiple things that they do, because I'm always fascinated by what like creative stuff people are up to. And it spiraled in a really cool way because I was like, oh, at least once a week I get to talk to like creative, interesting people in my living room. Well, this is unusual.
I mean, that's a really good point, and that sounds fucking awesome. It's like you also don't have to, go through the trouble of like transcribing it. It's just all there. You get what you pay for.
Exactly. It's like I get these little windows into people's experience, and then I get to share them with other people, and I'm like, oh, this is excellent. This is like all of my favorite things combined. I'm always very curious about people, and then I like to share with others.
Yeah.
It's been weird, but good. How is it? Thank you. How's it been like sharing your own stuff? Because it's a really unique time to be putting out any sort of art, really.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just put out an album called Death of a Cheerleader, and that process, I think the process of making it was a lot more fun than anything I've done before, I don't think, just because I wasn't really considering what other people would think of it while I was writing it. I was just writing it, and I think being in New York and kind of coming up in the live music scene, you're constantly surrounded by other bands who are, playing, like who's playing what venue and who's playing with who and who got the best show and who booked well, and you're kind of constantly, comparing, or at least I, tend to be a very, I don't know, it's sort of like the trap of being an artist is, incessant need to compare yourself to other people. So, I also was working as a publicist prior to the pandemic. So it was like I was also constantly surrounded by who is getting the most press and who's getting, what kinds of press, like who's in NPR, who got a Pitchfork review, so I was just always around, music from an industry perspective or from a, kind of a live show perspective, or it just kind of always felt like, selling in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I love playing shows, it was like a very spiritual thing for me performing. But I think you can kind of lose sight of the spiritual or human emotional side of art when you're kind of so in the commerce.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
so honestly, writing Death of a Cheerleader was a really refreshing turn of events, partially because, nobody had anything coming out. It was sort of like everyone was on the same playing field again.
Uh-huh.
Everybody's tour was postponed, everybody's release was postponed, everybody's everything was postponed.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got to think about music outside of a live space, outside of a release, outside of anything other than here's what's going on in my head, and here's what I want it to sound like, and here's what I need to process. So releasing it was, I think we're, I want to say we're coming out of it, but like, are we? I think releasing it kind of around the time that people were starting to release things again.
Right.
It was kind of, it was a weird readjusting to that level of competition, quote unquote, and saying, well,
Yeah.
there's so many big albums coming out that day, what if my work gets lost, whatever. I wish I just didn't think about those things.
Well, it's hard, like being in those multiple roles of being an artist, and then it's kind of poignant that your album is titled Death of a Cheerleader if you were in the publicist role prior. That I'm just like, I was like, that is, essentially being the cheerleader and spokesperson for other artists.
It's funny, I didn't even think about it like that.
Well, galaxy brain, starring my brain making weird associations.
Oh no, that is a cool association to make. I think, for me, the cheerleader was always like a goalpost standard that I held myself to. Back in the vein of comparison, being a young woman, and specifically a queer young woman and a person of color, I just grew up feeling like there wasn't really any space for myself anywhere. And the cheerleader was like kind of the ideal American beauty standard for like what it's like to be like a young femme person. It's like
Right.
attractive and popular and whatever else. So that was kind of like a standard that I held myself to that was unrealistic. And in like, raising Pom Pom Squad as a punk band, it was sort of like to contest that standard. So that was kind of the death in question, is kind of killing off that expectation of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to kind of like fit in an archetype that, like, in a way, I wondered when you were talking, I was like, I wonder if you can actually kill an archetype. Like, to have that concept just be like, no, we can put that concept to rest. That's what, like young women are supposed to be.
I kind of think so. I mean, I feel like, there are certain concepts that even though they're kind of not put to rest, they're definitely being questioned and recontextualized. Like, this idea, for example, of like the dumb blonde. I feel like there's kind of been a justice for blondes lately.
Yes.
Like, for example, the Britney Spears archetype. Like in the 2000s, everybody was like, she's just this young idiot, teenage girl. And I feel like now we're realizing how completely unfair media was to her and to women like her.
Yes.
This idea of like Legally Blonde being such a, goalpost piece of media for so many young women now. I don't know, like I feel like that archetype, somebody to write like a dumb blonde character, in the year of our Lord 2021, like is, I feel like it would sort of be, there would be pushback.
Yes, people would be like, wait, why that? Like, we already know that that's not the case.
Past this, you know what I mean? So I feel like in that way, an archetype can be killed off, or at least like an expectation of an archetype. Like if you're a certain type of woman, if you're like, femme and you're interested in clothes, you're interested in, well, I guess maybe the dumb blonde has been revived in the like bad takes on social media influencer movies, like the horror movie where you watch
Yes.
the young influencer die because they're so self-absorbed, whatever.
Well, and there's also the whole thing in social media now that I was just talking to someone about how we all went down kind of the rabbit hole of like only being social on social media because we had no other options for a while.
Yeah.
But like I don't know how to put it other than like the self-aware bimbo. Like I saw that trope a lot like on TikTok where it was like people that, you know, I'm trying to think of how to put it. It's like embodied that kind of exaggerated feminine, but in a way that they were like, fuck you, I'm so feminine because I like this aesthetic. Also, we should all be socialists now. Bye.
I feel like that's where I'm at, honestly. I feel like I'm embracing my bimboism in a very real way.
I just like nodded sagely. I'm like, yes.
I do think so. I mean, I think I've been having this like return to things that I liked as a kid. And, I think especially in my kind of generation, I'm 24, like manic pixie dream girl, I'm not like other girls girl was extremely prevalent when I was in middle and high school. And, there was a time where it was like I only had guy friends and I kind of played into all of the like girls are so much drama, just like repeating like dumb shit that I'd heard in, TV shows where the ingenue, the Bella of, in Twilight, I don't wear heels. Like I am a cool girl. I wear Converse. Both of these boys are obsessed with me. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Versus like I've always been like the kid that gravitated towards like princesses and pink and glitter and stickers and whatever. Like that's always been me. So I think I've been excited and I feel like even since like I think even in high school when kind of like Rookie Mag and that sort of like third wave, I think like third wave kind of white feminism aesthetic came to prevalence. I was like, this is the first time I'm ever seeing anybody say that liking pink is like not just for idiots. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes. So I don't know. I'm very into my bimbo-ness. Like I'm very into like a teeny tiny dress and like calling myself hot and being like, I need you to take 35 pictures of me before I leave the house, before my makeup gets messed up. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of all in it. It's super fun.
Well, that's I think what got lost is that like it's fun. Like it's really fun. And like you were talking about like liking the stuff that you did when you were a kid. Like even it was so cool like looking at your photos and I was thinking about even like what I liked to do when I was a kid and even in the pandemic like I've been doing because it's just fun. Like I love like sticking colorful shiny things to my face because it's fun. Like and it's like it's not even necessarily for an audience. It's because it's so much fun engaging with yourself that way. And it's like yeah, it's just great. And you're just like, oh, I get to wear like fun poofy things just because it's exciting. Like I get to spin around like a human meringue. This is great.
I love the way that you put that though, like kind of for the entertainment of yourself, because I think I've kind of been in a similar mind frame of like, things that maybe again, I've been thinking a lot about this influencer trope and this kind of like recontextualization of that character where it's like this moral like vanity is bad thing where entertaining yourself by putting on makeup or wanting to wear nice clothes or whatever is seen as this bad thing. And honestly, I just really like makeup and clothes. Like to me, posting on social media and taking pictures of myself, like I've always been interested in self-portraiture, like not just taking pictures of myself, but when other people, are self-portrait artists, like a Cindy Sherman, like that I just love it. I love kind of being able to see somebody how they see themselves or as close as you can kind of get to that.
Yes.
But, I started taking pictures of myself like on my, dad's like DSLR when I was in middle school. And I think I've always been fascinated by my own human body. Like just this is the form I'm in. And what does
Mhm.
that mean? And what does that look like? And who am I? And how does that change? And even with social media, like I just see it as kind of like a little way to be creative every day. It
I
feels,
love thinking of it that way because so many people do feel the competition that you mentioned from before, but infusing it with that idea of like, oh, you get to be creative and self-reflective. I'm like, oh, I love
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think also just being a person who is busier than I used to be and who doesn't get as much time to write and journal and play and be, social media almost feels like this weird, like, it's just kind of something you do every day, like making yourself coffee. Like you just kind of on it,
it.
perpetually. And the pandemic 100% made it worse. It was like social media is reality,
Yes.
but I don't know. It's like kind of ingrained in our world anyway. So like, might as well have fun with it.
That's what I find so fascinating is like, because are you technically, it's funny because I just thought about it. I was like, it's 24. Are you at the top of Gen Z or the bottom of Millennial then?
I think I'm I'm both.
Yeah, it's just like you might be kind of in like the same position I'm in where I'm like a crossover situation where I'm like,
Yeah, I'm a cusp.
yeah, it's like the hotly disputed elder millennial sector where they keep coming up for new names for our like micro generation where it's like the Oregon Trail generation, like weird things like that where I'm just like,
I feel like
ugh.
my kind of defining characteristic is I'm young enough to not really get Harry Potter, but old enough that I don't really get TikTok yet either.
That's I'm like that's beautiful. That got a cackle laugh. Well done. Yeah, it's
Thank
weird
you.
being like a cuspy one because yeah, mine is I'm just like I remember life before the internet.
Yeah.
But I also don't click on phishing scams. Like it's like
Uh,
I have a relatively high affect. I'm not a Gen Xer. It's not like I don't care about things. But also I don't use the word adulting. Like it's
correct.
like
Huge correct. Big giant correct.
it's like I'm right in the middle there. I'm just like, this is awkward.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like because I do remember when social media became like an aspect of our lives, and it's really fascinating to even see how different age groups adapt to the different social media platforms and how
Mhm.
people use them and why. And seeing like there's a few like elder millennials that are really killing it on TikTok, and I respect that. Um,
That's right.
and then there's like the occasional rogue agent, like Jack Black's TikTok is really fun, like stuff like that, where you're just like,
Jack
what?
Black. It's like, you know what I mean? I feel like I mean, it's Jack Black.
Yeah.
Like, what do we expect?
Oh yeah.
Of course he understands the assignment. Like, it makes to me at least.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I feel like there's always going to be people like that who kind of can do whatever and are always going to be on the pulse of whatever new social media trend comes up. I think it's just adaptability in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember like I think the first time I heard about Instagram, actually, I know the first time I heard about Instagram was my sophomore year of high school. Um, and you know, I had like a little personal Instagram where all the other people in my high school followed me. And then I think I started to learn that you could have a social media persona,
Mhm.
and that was a game changer for me. I like deleted my old personal Instagram, and then I just made this like completely curated, like, it was like videos of me like going to shows, like, I was kind of like the alt girl at my high school. I went to a very homogenous um high school in Florida, and I had gone from being in public school my whole life to being homeschooled and then to,
Whoa.
to doing private school. Um, right after. And private school was like just a huge culture shock. It was just a big shift. And I felt very alone. I was very isolated. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so like Tumblr and Rookie Magazine and, all of that kind of like alternative media was my entire life and personality. And then I like created Instagram and started going to like indie rock shows, with my mom like 3 nights a week. So it was like, posting myself at shows, posting, whatever little like vintage, like I got a Depop and I was like, this is amazing. You know what I mean? I was like an American Apparel girl. I was finding discontinued American Apparel outfits on Depop and,
Oh my God.
Yeah, I knew everything about the DIY scene in New York and LA. Like I was just plugged in as fuck. But it really like kind of like is a huge part of who I became as an artist and always will be, is kind of chameleon and the perpetual adapter and interpreter and referencer. And, it's kind of like that's how I learned to be. I didn't really have like my older siblings are very like nerdy and into the kind of like they're both huge like film nerds and we all grew up playing like a ton of video games, and so we were all very antisocial as well. So I feel like usually when you're a kid you have the like cool older brother or cooler, not that they're not cool, but you have the older sibling who kind of is like partying and like doing everything that you kind of like mimic as you get older and you learn from them. And I didn't really have that. And I, kind of had to teach myself to fit in. And I knew that I didn't fit in with the normies, quote unquote, and, found an alternative community.
That's what I was going to say, is that it sounds like online you were able to find reflections of yourself, or like kind of almost like what came to mind was like aspirational reflections, where it's like you're like, oh, but I want to be like that. I want to engage with that.
Yeah, for sure.
And like when you had spoken about that, like the whole cheerleader of like when you said even like the image of the young and beautiful American cheerleader, like what came to mind is definitely like that person's white, that person's tall, that person has like probably like blonde hair and blue eyes, like all the things that it's like, that come with that. And it's like you then sought out online to be like, hey, well, where do I fit in? I'm not those things.
Yeah. But I think also, like early lessons in feminism and, especially in like certain artists' work, I started to see the kind of alternative cheerleader character, like movies like But I'm a Cheerleader, for example.
Yes.
The queer leader. And you start seeing oh God, sorry. That's
your phone was like, pay attention to me. You were talking about me earlier.
that's my alarm to take my meds. So I'll do that after.
Yes. I was like, do the thing. I set an alarm for mine as well, because hilariously it's ADHD meds. So like if I didn't, I'd I'd forget.
Yeah, my partner very sweetly delivered them to me before this call because they're an angel.
We love this.
Oh, yeah. I'm very much a little bitch for my partner.
I was just like, partners delivering meds. My partner has ADHD as well, and like he forgot to get his medication filled this one week, and so like I ended up, because he called me, it was like every 2 hours he called me almost on the dot being like, I feel really weird. And I'm like, yeah, it's because you don't have your medication to use. Like, oh yeah. And then like 2 hours later he'd be like, I feel really weird. And so finally I was just like, do you just want some of mine? Like, do you just, here, I can do you a solid, like it'll hold. We do, we have like the exact same prescription.
Yeah, my partner and I also have the same prescription. Isn't that weird?
Oh, I'm like, it's true love.
Oh, we're ill together.
Exactly. None of us
Yeah.
make enough dopamine, but it's okay.
Yeah.
More about dopamine's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's true. I'm
Oh.
game.
That's like good to have people supporting you. And it's good, honestly. I'm glad that this even came up because I was talking to someone else about how so much of the last like time of our lives has highlighted the importance of mental health and even like talking about it, not just in a perfunctory way of like, oh my God, like I'm going to post on Instagram that I was anxious one day. It's like, no, actually talking to people about like managing mental health.
Yeah. In a real way. I'm kind of on that journey right now. Like I think I'm lucky that right before the pandemic, I was just starting to take medication, and
Mhm.
I don't know where I would be without it, honestly. I don't know how I would have gotten through 2020.
Right.
But I think now coming out of it, there is this like kind of expectation that everyone is just supposed to be okay again. And I certainly don't feel that way.
No.
uh, you know, I'm trying to parse out for myself like how this is to be done. I think everybody is.
It,
But
it's a very it's so interesting because we are pressured to like move forward and things are fine, which clearly they're not. Like we're clearly in another wave of the pandemic. And also like to not acknowledge the trauma of what everyone went through, even just like to be like, you're fine now. It's like it's okay to admit that what you went through was hard and disorienting and strange and that it's okay to talk about it. It's not like you're causing a problem by naming it.
right, absolutely. I feel like maybe, there's this kind of idealism, like this, like, everybody wants it to be the roaring 20s, and we just came out of this like horrible time, and now like we're all gonna kind of do our thing, and everybody's gonna party, and we're all gonna, like fuck each other and whatever. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like everyone kind of wants this like Woodstock resurgence as fantasy, you know? But it's kind of like there is still a level of responsibility that needs to be taken if you want to live that life. You know what I mean? It's like there needs to be mandates on masks and who can go where. And now all of the right-wing people are like, fuck Pom Pom Squad, which is fine because they probably didn't like me anyway. I do feel like it's like obviously it seems like a no-brainer,
Right.
because what's the other option? Like we're just going to be like, okay, well, the future is people are going to get it and some people are just going to die, and like you know what I mean, like it just feels like this gross oversight to just kind of ignore the problem just because we want it to not be there.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Um, and it's one of those things where it's a balance of like, yes, people should have individual choice. However,
Mm-hmm.
look to see does your choice affect other people because we've made an agreement to live in a society. And
We sure do live in a society.
we sure do. It's like
Live in a society. That's what I hear. I mean, I think, we definitely are in a culture of individualism. And, it's like, I'm not one to sit here and say, like, that I'm not self-centered because I am, and so is everybody. And especially in American culture, it's very much about the self and
yes.
self-made millionaire, a self-starter, whatever, a girl boss.
Oh God. I was like, I think that thankfully bypassed both of our micro generations.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think that's true, actually. I think that, yeah, I think we did miss the
Whew.
girl boss days. But, oh God, what was I even trying to say? I think, in terms of, it's like, I don't know, that kind of freedom is the same type of freedom that's like allowing like 5 corporations to wreck the entire environment.
Yeah.
And there needs to be at a certain point, like people aren't going to change the behavior, so there needs to be action, and I'm not one to sit here and say like the government mandating things is the end all be all and fixes everything, because it doesn't, and we know that. But there need to be repercussions for people who are like fucking up the environment.
Pretty much. I feel like
the whole earth.
This has been kind of like a group project, and a lot of us are participating, and then there's a few people that aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Sing it up for us. Like,
yeah. Oh God.
And thinking about that in terms of even like, I was thinking about what you were saying about like individualism kind of versus like collectivism. It's a balance, and it's like actions do have consequences. And it's funny that you're like the right wingers like don't even like Pom Pom Squad anyway. It's like thinking about, why do people think that they're free from the consequences of their actions?
I think everybody just wants it to be okay. But we need to accept that it isn't yet. And so, adjustments need to be made, whether it's like making sure that it, it's mandatory to wear a mask when you're at an event, at a club, at a whatever, or checking vaccination cards. I know that's also been like a hotly contested topic, but
that one to me is so fascinating because we've been checking vax cards for since we figured out vaccination. Like think about like going to public school, think about going to like, things like that. Think about like having a passport in general and like getting vaccinated to travel to different countries. It's like we've already been doing that. That's
correct.
not new.
Right. Like it is kind of baffling in that way. I think, again, it is this sort of idealism of I think people just don't want things to change. Like I remember at the beginning of this seeing like people like making, protesting and making signs that are like, "You're ruining my senior year." And it's like,
yeah,
bruh, like is that real? It's just kind of like, this really is not about your senior year,
right. And it's hard because like you were talking about even, and I related so much, like, talking about like forming your identity when you're a teenager, that I can't imagine if this had happened when I was a teenager. Like, granted, I did like to hang out by myself a fair bit, but like to have it be taken away, essentially, that of course it's not about you. There's a pandemic.
Right.
But I'm sure like I would have felt on some level that like almost like that self-centered injury where it's just like, but I don't get this thing. What?
I feel like we all had that to an extent. I definitely did. And I think honestly, with touring specifically, like we had put out this EP that, really had an organic growth that was surprising to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough that I was a publicist at the time, and my bosses like didn't know that I was in a band until my first day working, and I put out a song.
Aww.
And that song was in Stereo Gum, and that was like the first time I'd been in a national publication. And
Hey.
yeah, it was crazy. But and then of course my bosses found out, and they were like, "Oh, if you want to work PR from your desk, you can." And so they let me, and then as things kind of grew, they made me more of a priority.
Oh.
But for the most part, like things really began in a completely organic way. We didn't have promotion. We didn't, we spent like $400 making it.
Right.
It was a lot of like favors and friends of friends and strings pulled, and
Right. Right.
and to have gotten, we were going to play South by Southwest, and then we were going to do a club tour, and then after that we were doing like a tour where it was like between 1,000 and 5,000 capacity venues, and we were going to play in my hometown at the place where I went to homecoming my senior year of high school.
Oh.
So it definitely felt like an injury, finding out that all of that was gone. But I do think I had to kind of stop and be like, I'm not the only person that this happened to, and like, who am I to make it about myself? And that's not to say I wasn't allowed to be disappointed, because that's natural.
Of course.
But I do think there's a level of, if you're protesting the vaccine because it ruined your senior year, then we have a problem.
Yes. It's the whole being able to see the bigger picture where it's like you can hold both of those ideas in your mind that like your senior year and your tour was ruined, and also that it has nothing to do with you personally. It's like you can have both of those feelings and ideas simultaneously. They seem like they're in conflict, but you can have both of them.
I think feel like that's a huge lesson of this time is duality, and like, I don't know, just a need for a more nuanced understanding of the people around us. I think everybody, especially growing up in this culture, is always going to have a level of self-centeredness, selfishness, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
But it's important to like keep it in check. I've definitely, gotten caught looking like a damn fool for not keeping, my ego in check.
I was like, as we all have. I don't know anybody that has not had that experience where they're like, who's the villain? Oh, it was me.
Oh, it's literally me. I mean, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, and especially balancing being an artist and being a person. And really, like, that's so interesting. I didn't know prior to this that you were a publicist. Like, that's fascinating to me. And
yeah, it's like not like a fun glam thing to talk about. So I usually don't talk about my day jobs and interviews, but
that's something that I find so interesting is that like as artists, we're told in a way like not to talk about our day jobs, but like most artists have day jobs, and it doesn't mean you're like not an artist. That to me was always a really interesting trope that it's like you're somehow not an artist if you have a day job. And I'm like, have you met capitalism?
Like, yeah. I mean, I think, I guess my interpretation of it, right, is like there is something about being an artist that's supposed to be kind of glamorous and aspirational. Yeah. And I think more in recent history, this has dissipated, but there are some people who don't want the artist to be just like them. Right. There's people that want the artist to be kind of like an avatar for where they want to be. And I think kind of being on both sides of that, having been a person who was not a public figure and now being a person who is a public figure in a way, I see both sides of it. Because I feel like art kind of works in a pendulum of like, somebody told me this once, and I know it's from somebody really smart who wrote this down. I think that there was a philosopher that basically said history works in thesis and antithesis. And I think music works in a very similar way, where people want artifice and they want sugar and they want pop and they want fantasy, for a decade or for 2 decades or for however long. And then, there's a time when music gets weird and everyone wants Nirvana and the Foo Fighters and Hole and gritty and real and, and just like them. And, I do feel like in the age of social media, selling aspirational, selling, the kind of face-tuned, super glam flex culture, it's like a response to a capitalist problem, which is that people hate being advertised to, and they want to think it's their own idea, that they like this thing, that they want the designer nose job, that they want, the Dior saddlebag, whatever it is. They want to come to that themselves. And obviously, this idea of the influencer is a more insidious way of advertising in some ways. Right. But I think there are also a lot, there's a reality to be understood that these people who are the quote unquote ideal and who are selling an ideal are people, are just simply people who mostly are doing repetitive actions of posting and sharing and creating content. And, it's a job. Like it is literally a job to sell perfection.
Yes.
Yes. So there is this kind of, and I think, someone like me, for example, knows that, but every time I see a girl who I think is prettier than me wearing a dress, I'm like, I think I need that dress. It's like I'm like I feel like a lab rat in a way because I completely recognize that I'm being advertised to, but it doesn't stop me from wanting something anyway.
Well, and I feel like that's the difference between like one's cognitive mind and one's emotional mind, where like our cognitive minds, it's actually the newest part of our brains, the prefrontal cortex, and it's a little dodgy, frankly. And so it's like,
Got problems.
yeah, whereas like, the rest of our brain is far more developed, but that's mostly in, what traditionally was called like the unconscious mind, but it's all the other processes that go into the course of, what then gets manifested as like our emotions and our actions. But it's like that's the part of our brain that it doesn't care that we know, quote, know logically that something's an advertisement. It only cares about how do we feel when we look at that. Like that's all it's taking in, is that part of our brain is like just taking in like, what does this look like? How do I feel? And so it's discounting that we know that that's someone who literally probably like took like over 100 photos, picked the top two, edited them, like did all the things, wrote the caption, got paid by the company. Like we know that with like, say like 2% of our brain, and the other 98% of our brain is like, oh, pretty dress, want pretty, want feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
like on a personal level who grew up with such an aspiration towards embodiment, literally made a music video that is just me recreating shots from the Virgin Suicides because that was
wow.
I mean, it's true. It was like truly an aspirational moment for me as a teenager. To look like my favorite artist, to be like my favorite artist, to put myself in the context of my favorite artist. And also part of that is because I'm a person of color. And it's like the Virgin Suicides wasn't made with me in mind.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, it was made with wayfish white people.
Correct. And I will never be one of those. And I think I've kind of realized maybe more so lately within a more nuanced eye that I did aspire to that kind of wayfish white feminist aesthetic for a really, really long time. And I've had these major kill your idols moments where it's kind of like, it just becomes painfully obvious that those things were not invented for me. Right. But I do still, I do still feel this need to like embody a certain aesthetic or, put myself in the context of certain pieces of art, because it makes me feel like then I'll be valid. But also I just really love them. There's a kind of like love and also like envy. Like there's that kind of, I don't know, the fun, complicated feeling.
I was gonna say it's like it's that whole aspirational mirroring where it's like sometimes you're comforted by seeing people who are like you in media and you look for that, and sometimes you, or at least I try to, like, it sounds like what you're describing too, almost kind of fit yourself into the media that you're seeing. It's like a self insert, but like you really just want to like slide in as what you're witnessing instead of as yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think it was also just like wanting to be perceived a certain way. Because the girls in the Virgin Suicides were perceived as beautiful, attractive, like, like above, like above human. And obviously I understand now that the point is being critical of that idea of this idealization of women that really doesn't account for anything that they actually are. But as a teenager, you just go like, I want to be that pretty, like I want to be that interesting, I want to
Yeah.
feel, wanted. And I don't know, I think again it is that kind of thing of sometimes you want to know that somebody's like you and sometimes you don't. And I think being in public has been really weird for me in that way because there's also the practical side of it, which is just for my own emotional preservation and protection. I can't be as candid and open as I used to be. When Pom Pom Squad started, it was like I was fucking saying everything. I was like really, really candid about my financial situation, how much money I was making, how shows came together, what was going on, like in all sides of everything that I was doing, because I had the luxury of doing that. One, because the people who were following me and the people who were watching me were people that wanted to be there because you know, I was a fucking nobody. And if they liked my music, it was because they saw me at a show or because we went to school together or, whatever it may be. And this is not to say that I'm like a big, celebrity by any means, but it's definitely gotten to a point where I can't really read my comments anymore or look at my messages because it's not healthy for me.
Well, because then it's people interacting with, it's almost like too many degrees of separation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, and it harkened back in my mind, at least, to what you're saying about how, like, your discovery almost that you could create an avatar of yourself on social media, how you like deleted your Insta and like how to curate it Insta.
Yeah.
But, like, when people are interacting with your avatar, even though that avatar is part of you, it's not like it's like you wouldn't create an avatar that's completely unlike you, but it's almost like you take several of your characteristics and like just kind of push them to a 10 out of 10. Like,
there also is that thing that half of the influencers, it's like they're showing you who they want to be.
yeah.
And there's definitely a level of that. And it's like I don't really like, Photoshop my pictures of myself. Like for the first time in my life, I'm actually really proud of the way I look, which is which is just a nice moment for my own self-assuredness.
Yes.
But I do recognize that like some people are looking at me as a goalpost in a way that may not be healthy for them,
Yes. Yeah.
But in the same way that, my favorite artists, like, it's like nobody's going to go back on, and redo the virgin suicides to be more considerate of whatever. It's like it's an artist's expression of their own life and needs and wants and desires. And
Right.
whether or not that was, the virgin suicides in particular was invented for people of color remains to, it's like there's an obvious answer to that question. But I also do think that's kind of an exciting thing about the tradition of art is the idea of somebody seeing something and going, wow, I never saw myself in that, so I'm going to make it for myself. And I think part of my artistry is to do that on a very literal level,
Mm-hmm.
kind of putting myself in the context of art that I love. But, I do like the idea of somebody being like, damn, I really love Pom Pom Squad, but they don't represent me as a, X kind of marginalized person. So I'm going to start a band and I'm going to be that for somebody else or be that for myself.
Yeah, that you can see like a seed of yourself in there that you're like, okay, I see where the overlap is. And I also see where this like is not applying to me.
Absolutely. That's what happened to me with Riot Girl.
Yeah.
Honestly, almost everything I liked when I was a teenager has had a moment of coming to terms with that.
It's so interesting you say that because yeah, like I was reflecting on like the teenage media that I took in a lot and what I still enjoy and what I'm like, okay, I think that journey has ended. Like that, like I think like as time has gone on, like for instance, like Bjork has been an artist who's influenced me since I was a teenager and continues to do so because the more I learned about her, the more I learned that like how much she actually, and I didn't know this as a teenager, it wasn't talked about in her interviews, how much she engineers her own music. It was always emphasized who her collaborators were and things like that, which is great and all, but like I didn't understand then that like the things that I was doing like with electronic music were valid in a way because I didn't see that reflected in like my favorite artists. I was like, oh well, if Bjork has to use all these engineers, like who am I to do this?
Yeah.
And then like hearing her talk now that like, she's really insistent on like people showing who's actually creating those sounds, how she creates her music, things like that. I'm just like, oh, wow. And it's like almost like my little teenage self within me still is just like, oh, yay.
Well, it's a similar reason to why I never started a band, honestly, until, I started playing, I feel like I've been singing my whole life, but my parents recently told me that I never actually showed anybody that I could sing until I was like 10 or 11.
Oh,
And one day, like, my sister was auditioning for youth choir, and I was like, I want to audition too. And my parents were like, honey, you don't sing. So I went to the audition and, I came out and they were like, she's actually really good. She can sing. So that was kind of like how I started singing and I started playing guitar when I was, around 14. But for some reason, there was nothing ever that convinced me that I myself could write my own music. Like I just was learning covers and, sitting on my bed and, like learning how to play a fucking Weezer song. But I didn't see myself anywhere to a degree that, would convince me that people like me make music.
Yeah. I was talking with oh, what's her name? Her artist name is MXMTune, and
Ah, she's so cool.
she's so rad. It was one of those moments where I was just like, is it normal for me to be like, oh, Gen X is so good? I mean, Gen Z is so good. I was just like, Gen X is good too. Not gonna lie. I do like my Gen X friends, but Gen Z is like, I'm just like, I don't know what happened. It's kind of like Gen Z realized everything is broken. And so we're just going to make something new, unlike millennials that are like, oh no, we realized halfway through everything is broken. Gen
Yeah.
Z like realized right off the bat.
Yeah. Well,
And
because they have more language, I think it's like even, like being non-binary and using they them pronouns. I'd never heard of that until I went to college. And
yeah,
the easy adjustment to make is like, for me at least, it's not for everybody, but it's like I was kind of like, okay, like,
yeah,
this is something that I've never heard before, but this is how somebody identifies, and like, who am I to disrespect that in any
bingo.
capacity? And but it's like people who like I, was at one of my old jobs, and these two like little, they were maybe like 11 or 12-year-old kids came up, and one of the
Uh-huh.
girls I was working with misgendered one of them,
Mm.
and one of the kids was like, he goes by he him, you know what I mean, and was
Uh-huh.
so quick to correct her,
Oh,
and make her friend feel more comfortable. And I was just like, that's fucking awesome.
we
That's
love this.
because there's so many people in my life who, if they had had the language earlier and the resources to understand themselves better, would have saved them, saved themselves, not saved themselves, but like would have been spared a lot of discomfort and heartbreak. Um,
Yes.
you know,
And to have that kind of advocacy and also to see yourself in people, like that's what I was thinking of when I was talking to her was that like she was saying that, she had originally started same thing, like kind of like almost doing like fan art and like things like that. But then she's become kind of the people there. She's become the person that people see that they're like, oh, there's this biracial, bisexual artist. I too can do this. Like, it's like when you see just even one other person that's kind of in your lane doing the thing, you're like, ooh, okay. Like,
yeah.
I can maybe do that. Even if you're not exactly like that person, it's like if they're close enough.
Yeah, if they give you enough of a seed, that was like Mitski for me.
Oh,
I remember like I was just in a place in my life where, I moved, I was born in New York, but I moved back to New York for college, and I was there to study acting. And it was just not a healthy environment for me. I did not feel like myself. I was doing it for the wrong reason. Um,
mm-hmm.
I wanted everyone to tell me that I was worth it and that I was good enough. And I think also, as a person of color, there was a level of an inferiority complex
Mm-hmm.
that I kind of learned growing up. And, when I was in acting school, my superiors made a point to let me know that I was not pretty and that I
Wow.
was not going to receive the leading woman roles, that
Wow.
only be successful because being an actress of color was trendy. Uh,
I'm
correct. And
gonna throw everybody in the trash.
oh yeah. And like I was just singled out for dumb reasons. Like they're like, there was one moment that I kind of have returned to recently where I had a professor be like, wow, everyone in this class is so fun. Everyone except Mia. And it's kind of like this is an adult telling this to a 19-year-old.
Wow.
For what purpose? It's kind of like, what does that have to do with me doing well in your class other than just to tell me that you don't like me and that you don't enjoy my time or presence.
And what a message to reinforce for everybody witnessing that too.
Oh, it was horrifying. I mean, it's like also when somebody singles you out in that way, it's just really mortifying. And there was this kind of energy of like, there are no, I mean, literally, people would say there are no bad classes, only bad actors. So if you were falling behind, it was because you were not good at this and not because, somebody could have stopped and said, hey, maybe here's what you're not understanding. And I want to spend a little extra time, talking you through it. It was just kind of like, it was very sink or swim in a way that I feel like is not healthy to a place of higher education. And like the point is education. The point is not like telling you how much you suck.
Right. Surprisingly, that doesn't motivate people to learn or get better at stuff.
Correct.
Stunning situation.
Yeah, I mean, so I left and, eventually transferred to music. And that was kind of the first time I was able to validate myself in my own experience. And Mitski, like when I was in the middle of that transfer, or not transfer, but like as I was kind of falling out of love with acting, I heard a Mitski song for the first time because my best friend was a fan of hers and is a fan of hers. And like, it was like a life changer for me. I heard Your Best American Girl, and it was the first song I'd ever heard about being multiracial in a romantic relationship with a white person. And I felt so understood and respected. And literally, I like slept over at a friend's place once, and she was like, "You were talking about something in your sleep," and I was like reciting lyrics from it in my fucking sleep.
Oh, you get to be that person. Like, that's amazing.
It's really, I don't know. It is a cool feeling, and I don't take it for granted.
Oh, I was just like, now I wonder who's reciting your lyrics in their sleep.
Oh my God. Well, honestly, seeing like even messages of people who have expressed a similar sentiment to me, or even people who are just like, your music really helped me get through a breakup, or I got out of an abusive relationship, and your music, helped me do that, or helped me realize that the situation I was in wasn't healthy. Like it, that's crazy. And so many artists were that catalyst for me. And I don't know, music is a tradition, and I do feel like art is a tradition. And there's a lot of discourse about the way that music is passed down, or like originality. And I don't know, I just think maybe it's context is really important, where things come from. Because it's like, I don't know, I feel like kind of the point is to pass it down. That's how history gets done.
It's almost like the flip side of the negative consequences of one's actions, that it's like there's also really positive consequences. Like if you choose to put out music, if you choose to put out art, if you engage with this, like there are very positive consequences. Then people think about themselves differently, that they evaluate what's going on around them differently, that it helps them through a hard time, like things like that, that I'm just like, oh, there's the silver lining there is, you can do stuff that you're like, well, that was dumb. Or you can do stuff where you're like, oh, that was glorious.
And I feel like music is kind of, I mean, not kind of, it is the universal connector in so many ways. I re-listened to a song recently, or I was feeling something really specific, and I felt very isolated in that feeling. Because no one in my life really related to what I was dealing with. And, I remembered a lyric from a song that I've known for a long time and that I've always loved. And I just finally understood it. And I was like, she was exactly about what I was writing about. Or not writing about, but feeling, And I just had this intuition. And even if it wasn't true, it's like that's what it meant to me. And I get to just keep that in my back pocket and have a little glimmer of light that I'm not.
I was gonna say that's like a beautiful note to end on, to be like, hey, like you're never alone in your feelings. Like someone else has felt that at some point.
Yeah. That's the amazing thing about human beings is no matter where you go, no matter what you do, and no matter what part of history that you're in, every feeling has already been felt, even if it's not in the same context. And you're never alone in those things. And it's just finding the people, the things, the moments, the pieces of art that make you feel seen and heard. Because it's
Exactly.
and then being that person, writing for yourself and, exploring that for yourself and getting to be that for someone else.
And then the cycle continues.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you for
Yeah.
being so generous with your time. This has been such a fun conversation.
Oh, this has been really fun for me too. I just like to talk a lot.
I mean, I started a podcast, so on the same page with you.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of Why Not Both. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who is literally a rock star. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.